Hello everybody, and welcome back to my theater. We're here in my main listening position, and we're going to go over a few things and have some fun with this build. And this is a big one. So what I want to talk about is our bass situation in my home theater. As you all know, or probably know if you've seen my other videos, I have had two SVS PB1000 Pro subwoofers behind my acoustically transparent screen in a cavity that I built to get them out of the way, as this is an open multi-purpose space. I didn't want them taking up any real estate on the floor. They're in a cavity behind the screen. I just got them all dialed in with REW. If you've seen my previous video that I just did, got a nice house curve set up with them, and I've been listening to them, and to be honest with you, they sounded great. They did have good output. I'm not complaining about their bass or the sound or anything like that, but this is a large space. It's an open room. It is not enclosed, not a dedicated space. And I did have people tell me on the forums that it probably wasn't going to be sufficient for my space, and I may not be happy with the bass that I receive from them. That's not necessarily the case. Sitting here across the screen on any of my positions, actually, I could feel the bass from the two SVS PB1000 Pro subwoofers. If you put your head back on the seat, you could actually feel the chair vibrating from the bass that's reverberating throughout the room. I had a good response from them. Really no complaints. I was actually pretty impressed that those two ported subwoofers could give me that experience given as big as this space is. However, I wanted more, and it was quickly apparent that I feel I had to run those two SVS subs pretty hot, as in their gain or their volume was typically -5, sometimes all the way up as high as it could go. And then I even had to turn the trim in my Denon AVR up into the positive. I was running like +4 or all the way up to +5 for the subwoofer trim level to get the kind of output that I expected in this room and what I wanted to experience and feel out of my subs. Felt like I was maxing them out is what I'm trying to say, and I don't think that was the right way to go about doing it. So naturally, I needed to add some subwoofers, or really it wasn't going to be able to reposition them at that point. I did some research, and even from the get-go, I wanted to do a DIY sub. I was really looking into it, researching it, decided that there were too many unknowns during my initial build. I was worried about cost and how much that was going to add. To be honest with you, it really wasn't that bad at all. So what I ended up doing is going with 4 Stereo Integrity HT18 V3. I believe that's version 3 of their HT18 driver. 18-inch subwoofer. I'm putting 4 of them in an Infinite Baffle Setup in the sub cavity along the back wall, facing out into the room, and I will take the two SVS PB1000s and put them behind this row of seating and integrate them using SVS's wireless adapters. So we'll have 4 18s in the front and the 2 12s right behind these seats. And I did call SVS, and since they're ported subs, and my research told me you don't want to mix ported with sealed subs, they're sending me the port plugs to put into the SVS subwoofers, and then you can go into the digital app and change the tuning, the port tuning from ported mode to sealed mode. So that's going to be the plan, and getting some increased SPL and subwoofer output in my theater. Let's jump right into this build. It was pretty fun to go through. The end result is pretty spectacular. I'll walk you through how we got this all accomplished, and let's go check it out. These are the Stereo Integrity HT18 V3. They feature an 18-inch driver with dual 2-ohm voice coils that are rated at 750 watts RMS. I will leave a link in the description below to Stereo Integrity's website where you can see the full specs and details. They were double boxed and very well protected for shipping. These subs are huge, weighing in at just over 36 pounds. These are the biggest subs I've ever had in either my home or car applications. It's truly hard to tell their size just by looking at these pictures. To power these 4 18-inch subs, I found a Behringer NX3000 amplifier that was a demo unit and on sale. I realize these amplifiers are underrated on their power output. While I was researching the Infinite Baffle Setup, I found you don't need as much power because they don't need to overcome the pressure of being inside a box. They are much more efficient and take less power when you use them in an infinite baffle setup. I also didn't want to overpower them or damage them, so I decided to start with this amplifier and see how it does. I'm going to be wiring subs using both amplifier channels in a 2 ohm load, so 2 subs per channel. So theoretically, the Behringer puts out 1500 watts per channel in 2 ohms. So with 2 subs per channel, they should split that 1500 watts and each get 750 watts per sub. The Behringer NX3000 amplifier has 2 inputs, which are XLR connections, and 2 outputs, which are speak-on connections. I'll touch more on these different types of connections in a little bit in this video. Okay, let's get to installing these subwoofers. My initial plan was to add a 3/4 inch piece of birch to the back side of the 1/2 inch MDF that already exists as the back wall of the subwoofer cavity. I will be gluing and screwing the piece of birch to the back side of the MDF. The 3/4 inch birch will be low enough to get screwed into the lower part of the 2x4 frame of the subwoofer cavity, and the top part will have to be braced. Each piece of birch is approximately 22 to 24 inches long and spans between the 2x4 uprights, which give extra support across the back of the cavity. At this initial stage, I thought I could get the first 2 sub drivers between the span of 2x4 uprights, but I quickly figured out I better add another upright for additional bracing. So now you'll see the additional upright 2x4 bracing, and it's time to cut out the first holes into the 3/4 inch birch pieces. I used a jigsaw to cut out the holes, as I don't own a router and didn't want to purchase one just for this project. The holes aren't perfect by any means, but if you take your time and go slow, you can do a pretty good job with a jigsaw. After the first hole was cut, I am test fitting a sub into the hole, as I will be using this initial hole to trace my other holes out. After all 4 holes were cut into the birch pieces, and the holes were then traced onto the MDF cavity wall, it was time to remove the back wall of the cavity. This is the very corner piece of MDF that makes up the back wall, where the farthest sub will fit into. Now that I have access to the subwoofer cavity, it's time to remove the 2 SVS PB1000 Pro subwoofers. Since more subwoofers are always better than less, I came up with a plan to keep these subs in my system. I moved both of them behind my row of seating by the back wall opposite of the screen. I purchased the SVS SoundPath wireless adapters in order to place these 2 subwoofers into their new locations. And by purchasing 2 wireless kits, I can still route them through my mini DSP so they can be controlled individually of each other. I also removed the 2 Panamax surge protected outlets I put into the sub cavity and swapped them with the outlets along the back wall so the subwoofers can still utilize their protection. The next step is to cut some more holes into the back wall of the cavity for the remaining 3 subwoofers. Now it's time to reassemble the cavity and bracing and prepare for subwoofer installation. Since the subwoofer holes were so big, it made it easy to install a bunch of screws from the inside of the cavity through the MDF into the rear external upright 2x4s. As I mentioned previously, it's time to glue and screw the birch panels into their final position. I applied a liberal amount of wood glue to the panel and then used a small foam roller to smooth it out evenly across the whole surface. I repeated the same exact process for the remaining 3 birch panels. Time to install the drivers. These are heavy and weren't super easy to get into position. I'll admit I used the wrong type of screws that you'll see here in a second, but I did remove them and install screws that have threads all the way up to the head of the screw. I also installed them on top of the gasket, not realizing you can lift up the gasket of the subwoofer and install the screws underneath it. It looks much cleaner, and I'm sure it's way more secure that way as well. As I mentioned, I'm wiring these in a 2 ohm load per channel with 2 subs per channel. I followed this diagram from the 12volt.com. The Behringer Amplifier has 2 inputs, 1 per channel, that require XLR connections. I had to purchase 2 of these RCA to XLR adapter cables from Amazon in order to have my connections come out of the mini DSP and into the Behringer Amplifier inputs. The outputs of the Behringer are speak-on connectors. I installed these connectors onto the 12 gauge wire and started following the diagram to wire them properly into a 2 ohm load per channel. After I was done wiring all 4 subs, I tested both pairs of subs to confirm they were wired properly into a 2 ohm load. For the upper bracing, I needed to install another 3/4 inch piece of wood to get the top part of the birch panels flush with the 2x4 upright supports. I cut pieces of 1x2s and attached them across the top of each birch panel. Then I measured and cut a 2x4 that will attach horizontally all the way across the rear wall of this cavity, securing it with screws into each 2x4 upright and each birch panel in between the uprights to give it strength. At this point, I could grab onto the sub's magnet area and try to wiggle them a bit, and they appeared to be rock solid. I was going to be done bracing everything at this point, until I got them turned on and could literally see the flex of the 2x4 uprights when all 4 subs were hitting hard. So to add additional bracing, I decided to run braces from the 2x4 uprights to the back wall of this cavity under the stairs. I was able to span the back wall with 2x4s, then attach a 2x4 across to prevent the uprights from flexing any further. The front braces are not braced into the drywall as it looks in the picture. I did span the opposite side studs and braced into that stud. Now that most of the work was done on the back side, it was time to make the front look pretty again and cut out the foam tile pieces around the 4 subs and hot glue them back into position. Cutting the foam tiles proved to be a little more challenging than I had thought, as they are a full 2 inches thick. It's not perfect, but it still looks pretty good. So how do they sound? Well, let's just say mission accomplished. I'll leave you with this video of them in action. I just finished integrating them with Room EQ Wizard and my Mini DSP 2x4 HD, and they sound absolutely mind-blowing. It is a night and day difference in both bass output and bass quality. They integrated really well with the 2 rear SVS subs. I will have a video coming out soon with the REW results of adding these 18s to my system, so please consider subscribing if you haven't already so you don't miss it. Please give this video a like or comment if you have any suggestions or questions for me. Thanks for watching as always, and we'll see you in the next one.